Chosen one, heaven does not raise a red alert lightly. It has not sounded one like this in centuries. And tonight, it sounded one about you. You did not stumble onto this by accident. It was sent deliberately by a hand higher than chance, straight to you, because something has reached a point that could not wait one more day. So let me say this clearly before your fear fills in the blanks, because it will try to. An alarm is not doom. An alarm is not punishment. An alarm is love, refusing to let you sleep through the single most important moment of your life. Here is what the alert is actually about. For years, a gap inside you has been quietly widening. A drift between the two halves of you that were made to work as one. Most of the time, a drift like that just makes life foggy and hard to move through. But yours has reached a threshold, a rare and specific point where, if it widens any further, the very thing you were made for starts to slip out of reach. And heaven will not stand by and let that happen in silence. That is why the alarm. That is why now. That is why you, specifically, tonight. So let me be clear about what this is and what it is not. This is not a message meant to fill you with dread and leave you there. Dread is useless, and it is not why the alert was sent. This is the opposite. This is a wake-up call delivered in time, on purpose, with a solution attached. You are not being warned, so you will panic. You are being warned, so you will act. While acting still changes everything. Here is what I am going to walk you through, and you have to stay to the end, because the correction comes late. First, I am going to show you what the widening actually is, so you understand why your life has felt the way it has. Then I am going to show you why this narrow window is the moment to close it, and not some other time. After that, I am going to show you what is at stake, what the alarm is protecting. And, near the end, I am going to place in your hands the one thing that reverses the drift and brings the two halves of you back into one. None of this works if you treat your own life as less urgent than heaven does. So right now, while the alarm is still sounding, answer it. If some part of you can feel that this alert is meant for you, go to the comments and type 3 words. I hear it. Let heaven know the message did not arrive too late. And I already hear the question rising, because it rises in everyone heaven has to alert. You are thinking, if this is so urgent, why am I only hearing about it now? Why did no one warn me sooner? Hold that question at the front of your mind, chosen one. Because it is not a reason to despair. It is the exact question whose answer is the key. By the end of tonight, you will not just understand the alarm. You will have silenced the thing that set it off. So let us begin with what the widening has actually felt like from the inside, because you have been living with it for years without a name for it. It feels like a slow, creeping distance from yourself. Like the person you were meant to be keeps getting a little further away, a little harder to reach, a little more like a memory than a destiny. You used to feel closer to your calling. You used to have moments of clarity where you knew exactly who you were and what you were for. And somewhere along the way, those moments got rarer, the fog got thicker, and the gap between the life you are living and the life you sense you were made for got wider. You told yourself it was age, responsibility, just the way life goes. But it was the widening. I need you to hear this tonight. That growing distance was not inevitable, and it was not your imagination. It was a measurable drift, and it has a direction. And left alone, it only ever moves one way. Vida, the two halves of you that were designed to work as one, have been slowly pulling apart for years, and every year the gap grew, the harder it became to feel whole, to feel clear, to feel close to the thing you were made for. And here is why the alarm is sounding precisely now. A drift can be gentle for a long time, and then reach a point where it accelerates. You are at that point. That is the threshold. That is what heaven flagged. And here is the reframe that changes the whole story, and I want you to receive it slowly. You have probably been carrying a quiet fear that the distance you feel from your calling means you already missed it, that the window closed, while you were not looking. That the alarm, if anything, is confirmation that it is too late. But an alarm is never sounded for something already lost. You do not raise an alert about a ship that has already sunk. You raise it about a ship you can still reach. The very existence of this red alert is proof that your calling is not gone. It is proof that it can still be reclaimed, and that now is the moment to do it. Think about what it means that heaven sounded an alarm. It almost never sounds. It means your life crossed a threshold worth interrupting centuries of silence for. It means what you were made for is significant enough and still reachable enough that love would not let the window pass without waking you. This is not the behavior of a heaven that has written you off. This is the behavior of a love that saw the drift reach the critical point and refused to let you sleep through your last clear chance to reverse it. Let me say the heart of it as plainly as I can, because this single sentence is the spine of everything tonight. The red alert is not doom. It is love, waking you at the exact moment a gap inside you widened to the point of threatening your calling, so that you could close it while closing it is still possible. That is the shift. Not, you are too late. You are right on time. Because you were woken on purpose. And notice the relief already moving in you. If the widening were beyond repair, there would be no alarm, only silence. But an alarm means there is still something to do, and time, barely, to do it. Something in you has already begun to wake, or these words would not be landing with this weight. You are more on time than you feared. Let me show you what the widening actually is, and consider the improbability of the timing, because the timing itself is part of the message. This alarm did not reach you years ago, when the gap was small and you would not have understood its weight. And it did not reach you years from now, when the threshold had passed and reversing the drift would be the work of a decade. It reached you at the one narrow point where the warning can still do its whole work, where the least effort produces the greatest change. That is not how random things arrive. That is how a rescue arrives, timed by someone watching the drift closely, waiting for the exact moment the alert could still save everything, and sounding it precisely then. So let me name the widening, because naming it is the beginning of closing it. Deep inside you there are two halves that were built to move together. There is the half that holds your vision, your sense of calling, the part that knows what you were made for. And there is the half that handles the daily world, that manages, that copes, that keeps the machinery of an ordinary life running. When those two are close, synchronized, working as one, you feel whole, and your calling feels near, and clarity comes easily. But life, with all its demands and wounds and years, tends to pull them apart. The managing half gets louder and busier. The visionary half gets quieter and more distant, and the gap between them widens. I am going to give this a name so you can recognize it. We can call it the widening. The widening is the slow drift of the two halves of you away from each other, and it is the reason your calling has felt further away with each passing year. It does not happen all at once, which is exactly why it is so dangerous. It is gradual. A little more distance each season, a little more fog, a little harder to remember who you are, under all the coping. And because it is gradual, you adapt to each new level of distance as if it were normal, until one day you look up and the person you were meant to be feels like a stranger you used to know. Once you see it, you understand so much about your life. It is why the dreams that once felt vivid now feel embarrassing to say out loud. It is why you can function perfectly and still feel hollow, competent at the life you have, and quietly grieving the life you sense you missed. It is why prayer sometimes feels like shouting across a growing distance. You are not losing your faith, and you are not failing. You are experiencing two halves of yourself that were meant to be one, drifting apart, and the calling that lives in the visionary half getting harder to hear across the widening gap. And here is the mercy in this, chosen one. The widening is not a moral failure, and it is not permanent damage. It is a drift, and a drift can be reversed. Nothing about you is lost. The visionary half of you, the one that holds your calling, is still fully alive. It has not died. It has only drifted out of easy reach. And a thing that has drifted apart does not need to be rebuilt. It needs to be brought back together. That distinction is the difference between grieving a calling as lost and reclaiming it as merely distant. You did not miss it. It drifted, and drift can be closed. So the only real question left is the one you asked me at the start. If the gap has been widening for years, why could I never close it myself? Why did trying to get back to my calling never work? That question is not a dead end. It is the doorway. Because the reason it never closed under force is the same reason it is about to close now. And to show you that, I first have to show you why the widening accelerated to a threshold. Because understanding the timing is how you understand the urgency. Let me make it concrete, because you will trust it more once you catch it in your own life. Think of something you once burned to do, a dream that used to feel vivid and certain, back when you were younger and closer to yourself. Now notice how it feels to think of it today. For most people, it feels faded, almost embarrassing, like a photograph left too long in the sun. You may have decided that fading meant the dream was never real, or that you outgrew it. But dreams do not fade because they were false. They fade because the half of you that holds them has drifted out of reach. The dream is exactly as alive as it ever was. You have simply been standing further and further from it. And the fact that you can still feel its pull, even faintly, means it is still close enough to reach. So let me show you why the widening reached a threshold now, because the timing is the whole reason for the urgency. A drift between the two halves of you does not stay gentle forever. In the early years, the gap is small, and you can still reach across it. You have moments of clarity, flashes of your calling, times when the two halves briefly close and you remember who you are. But every year the gap grows, the reaching gets harder, and something quietly dangerous begins to happen. The two halves start to forget how to find each other at all. Think of two people drifting apart on separate currents. At first they can still call out, still swim back toward each other, but past a certain distance, the voices no longer carry, and the currents take over, and what was a gap becomes a separation. That is the threshold. It is the point where the widening stops being something you occasionally close, and starts being something that closes on its own, sealing the visionary half of you and the calling it holds. On the far side of a distance, you can no longer cross by reaching. You are at that point, not past it, at it, which is the one moment when the alarm can still do something. And here is what makes this window so rare and so precious. At the threshold, the two halves still remember each other. The bridge between them is thin, but it is not gone. A signal can still cross, which means the drift can still be reversed, quickly, if it is done now, while the memory of wholeness is still alive in both halves. Wait until the threshold passes, and reversing it becomes the work of years instead of the work of weeks, because you are no longer closing a gap, you are rebuilding a connection that has gone silent. That is why heaven sounded the alarm at this exact point, and not sooner and not later. This is the moment when the least effort produces the greatest change. Now let a new picture begin to form, because your future is built from the images you allow yourself to hold. Imagine the widening reversed. Imagine the two halves of you back in easy reach of each other, the fog lifting, the calling that felt like a distant memory suddenly close and clear again. Imagine waking up and feeling whole, feeling near to the person you were made to be, no longer grieving a life you missed, but stepping into a life still fully available. Picture the distance you have felt for years simply closing, and the clarity you thought was gone, coming back. That is not a fantasy. That is what happens when the drift is caught at the threshold and reversed in time. Feel what that image does in your body right now. The grief of the growing distance loosens. The fear that you missed your moment softens. That loosening is not you imagining things. It is a preview. A small, real taste of what it is to have the two halves close again, sneaking through a moment when the alarm has woken you enough to reach across. And if even that small taste can shift how you feel this moment, imagine what happens when the gap does not just narrow for a second, but closes and stays closed. That is where tonight is going. But to get there, you have to see why every past attempt to reach your calling failed, which is exactly where we go next. And there is a reason the acceleration feels frightening, and I want to name it, so it does not master you. As the gap widens toward the threshold, you feel it as a rising sense of running out of time, a low urgency you cannot explain, a fear that something is closing. Most people numb that feeling or scold themselves for it. But that feeling is not anxiety to be silenced. It is your own soul reading the drift accurately, sensing the threshold before your mind could name it. It is the internal version of the same alarm heaven sounded from outside. The two are saying the same thing, and the moment you stop fighting the feeling and start heeding it, it stops being dread and becomes direction. Now the honest question rises, and I want to bring it right into the room. You are thinking, if I can feel the distance from my calling, why could I never just close it? Why did every attempt to get back to who I was meant to be fizzle out and leave the gap as wide as before? You have tried. You have had the bursts of motivation, the fresh starts, the promises that this year you would finally become who you know you are. And each time the fog came back and the distance returned. So you have every right to ask why. And the answer is going to lift a weight of self-blame you have carried for years. The reason force never closed the widening is that force comes from only one half of you. When you grit your teeth and try to reach your calling, it is the managing half straining across the gap toward the visionary half. But one half pulling cannot close a gap between two. It just exhausts itself and falls back, and the drift resumes. The two halves do not come together because one of them tries harder. They come together when both receive the same signal at the same time and are drawn back into rhythm. And that is something willpower, which lives in only one half, can never produce. That is why every burst of effort faded. You were trying to close a two-sided gap from one side. And there is a second voice, older and more tired, that I will not talk past either. It says, I have tried to reclaim my calling so many times, and I always drift back, so why would now be different? If that weariness is yours, hear me gently. The reason you always drifted back is not that you failed, it is that no one ever showed you the gap was a synchronization, and that reaching harder from one side could never sink two halves. Every attempt was aimed at the managing half, straining, while the real mechanism went untouched. Nothing you tried was wasted. It simply never reached the place where the two halves actually meet. So hear the mercy, chosen one. You did not lack discipline, and you are not doomed to drift forever. You have been trying to close a two-sided gap with one-sided force, trying to reach with willpower a wholeness that only ever comes from resonance. The drifting back was never a verdict on you. It was a mismatch of method. And the moment you stop straining from one side and give both halves the same steady signal, the gap that no effort could close begins to close on its own. That signal is a real thing, and it can be produced on purpose, in the exact place the two halves drifted apart, beneath the level of words. For most of history, it was out of reach for an ordinary person. It is not anymore. And to show you why, I have to show you where the widening actually lives, not as a metaphor, but as something science can now point to directly. That is where we go next. And notice how quietly the widening does its work, because that is what makes it so easy to miss. It never announces itself. There is no single day you can point to and say, that is when I lost touch with who I was meant to be. It is 1,000 small mornings where the managing half handled one more thing and the visionary half went one shade quieter. 1,000 small compromises that each seemed reasonable. That is how a calling slips away, not in a dramatic fall, but in a slow, unremarkable drift that you adapt to so smoothly you never sound the alarm yourself, which is exactly why heaven had to sound it for you. So let me show you where the widening actually lives, because this is the moment it stops being poetry and becomes something you can hold. For most of history, no one could point to it. Every wise tradition sensed a distance that grows within a person over a lifetime, a slow separation from the self one was meant to be, but no one could say where the gap was. And then, in the last century, science found the seam. There was a researcher named Dr. Roger Sperry, and his work on the human brain earned him the Nobel Prize. What he uncovered, put simply, is that you do not have one mind working as a single unit. You have two hemispheres, a left and a right, joined by a bridge, and each runs a different half of your inner life. One side holds structure, logic, the managing of the daily world. The other holds vision, intuition, wholeness, the part that carries your deepest sense of what you were made for. When the two are freely synchronized across the bridge, you feel whole and your calling feels near. And when the traffic across that bridge thins over the years, the two hemispheres drift into separate rhythms, and the visionary half, and the calling it holds, gets further and further out of reach. Sit with what that means, chosen one, because this is the widening made visible. The distance you have felt growing between your daily life and your calling is not a feeling with no cause. It is the bridge between your two hemispheres slowly going quiet, the two halves drifting into separate rhythms, the visionary side receding as the managing side takes over. This is not a flaw in your faith. It is a measurable state in the very organ God gave you to know your purpose through. And here is the mercy hidden in that fact. A measurable drift is a reversible drift. What drifted apart across a quieting bridge can be brought back together, if the bridge is made to carry traffic again before it goes fully silent. That is why willpower never closed the gap, and why this is different in kind. Willpower is one hemisphere straining toward the other, across a bridge too quiet to carry it. What actually closes the widening is restoring the bridge, giving both hemispheres the same steady signal at the same time until they lock back into a shared rhythm and the two halves are one again. When that happens, people describe the same thing over and over. The fog, lifting, a sudden nearness to themselves, a sense that the person they were meant to be, who had felt so far away, is suddenly right here, reachable, close. For a long time, bringing the two hemispheres back into sync on purpose was something only a handful of researchers could attempt. With wires and screens in a lab, most people would never enter. It stayed locked in that world while countless chosen ones drifted further from their callings each year, blaming age, or life, or themselves. But it did not stay locked away, because one physician took what Dr. Sperry proved and asked a bold question. What if the signal that restores the bridge could be delivered through something as simple and as safe as sound? That question is where your answer begins, and I am going to bring it to you right now, because with an alarm sounding, you should not have to wait. The physician who asked that question is a neurologist in New York City named Dr. Daniel Barone. He spent his career studying how the brain moves between states, and he kept circling the same seam Dr. Sperry had revealed. If two hemispheres drifting apart is what pulls a person further from wholeness and from their calling, then the reverse had to be true. Bring the two halves back into rhythm, and the drift reverses, and what felt far away comes near again. The only question was how to deliver that signal simply, safely, and without a laboratory. What he arrived at works through sound, and there is a reason sound is the key and not willpower. Sound reaches both hemispheres at the same instant, and it speaks straight to the deeper, wordless part of you in the only language it has ever trusted, which is resonance rather than force. He engineered a precise audio sequence built on an approach he calls neural sync technology, designed to send both halves of the brain the same steady pulse until they draw back into a shared rhythm and the bridge carries traffic again. He gave the finished tool a name: the genius switch. And the name points to what people actually feel: the sense of a switch flipping, of the fog clearing, and the distance closing, as the two halves of the mind find each other again after years of drift. Here is what I love about it, chosen one, and why it fits everything we have said tonight. It does not ask you to strain harder toward a calling that keeps receding. It does not ask you to force the two halves together from one side. It simply gives both halves the same true note to stand in, until they are drawn back into rhythm and the gap closes on its own. You are not white-knuckling your way home. You are restoring the bridge, in the exact place the widening happens, beneath words, in the physical rhythm of the brain itself. So the drift that set off the alarm quietly reverses. And it was built for a real life, not a monastery. The whole sequence runs about 8 minutes. That is the entire practice. 8 minutes of listening, once a day, ideally somewhere quiet with something over your ears, so the signal reaches both sides cleanly. You do not have to concentrate hard or empty your mind. If your thoughts wander, the bridge keeps rebuilding anyway, because the signal speaks underneath your thinking. You put it on, you let the sound do the synchronizing, and one session at a time the two halves drift back toward each other instead of apart. It comes as a simple audio file sent straight to you, so there is nothing to wait for and nothing to install. And with an alarm sounding, nothing to wait for is exactly what you need. Just you, the sound, and 8 quiet minutes a day in which a drift of years begins, at last, to reverse. Now I will be honest, because you have been sold shortcuts before, and I refuse to add to that. This is not magic, and it is not a replacement for your walk with God. It is a tool. What it does is reverse the widening, so the calling that drifted out of reach comes near again, while there is still time to reclaim it. What comes back across the closing gap was always yours. And that is exactly why so many chosen ones, once the drift reverses, describe it not as gaining something new, but as finally coming home to a self they were afraid they had lost for good. Let me show you how to hold it in your own hands, tonight, without delay. And here is why this reaches what no amount of resolve ever could. Resolve speaks to one hemisphere, the managing one, and asks it to try harder, which only widens its lead over the quiet visionary half and pulls the two further apart. Restoring the bridge does the opposite. It does not ask one half to strain toward the other. It gives both the same steady note until they are drawn back into one rhythm. So the closing of the gap is not something you achieve by force, but something that happens the moment the two halves can hear each other again. So let me tell you exactly how it comes to you, and I am going to be completely straight about the numbers because you have been misled enough, and I will not add to it. When this was shown to other physicians and specialists, people who understood what it took to engineer, several of them said the honest value sat around $500. And when you consider what it does, quietly reversing a drift that threatens the thing you were made for, in 8 minutes a day, that number is not unreasonable. People pay far more than that for far less, for a single afternoon of talk that fades by the weekend and never once closes the gap. But it was never meant to sit behind a $500 wall, because the people who need it most are so often the ones who have already spent everything just to keep standing. So the price was brought down, first, to $49, already a fraction of its worth. And then, on the page I am going to point you to, a further $10 comes off, which brings the whole thing to $39. One time. For lifetime access. You are not renting the way back to your calling. Once it is yours for good. To return to any morning, the old drift tries to widen the gap again, and it does not come alone. Alongside the main sequence, there are several companion pieces included at no extra cost, each built to support the same closing from a different angle across your ordinary day. So the nearness you find in those 8 minutes has somewhere to live when the demands of life try to pull the halves apart again. They are simply included the moment you step through the door. Now here is the part that should let the careful part of you finally exhale. It is carried by a full, ironclad, money-back guarantee. That means you do not have to be certain tonight. You do not have to silence every doubt before you begin. You can put it on, listen for the 8 minutes, feel for yourself whether the fog softens and something long distant begins to come near, and if it does nothing for you, you ask for your money back, and you keep every companion piece anyway. The entire risk has been lifted off your shoulders and placed onto the promise of the thing itself. All you have to bring is your willingness to listen. And with an alarm sounding, I will only say this honestly. The $39 price carries a warning that it will not stay there forever, so the door open tonight is not promised to be open later at the same number. The link is waiting in the description below and pinned at the top of the comments, so you cannot miss it. When you are ready, you go there, you step through, and the audio comes straight to you by email, nothing to wait for. And I want you to picture what you are truly stepping toward, because it is not a purchase, it is a reclamation. Picture the fog lifting and the person you were made to be coming back into clear view. Picture the distance you have grieved for years simply closing. Picture answering the alarm not with panic but with action, and reversing the drift while reversing it is still the work of weeks and not years. That reclamation is not far away, chosen one. It is on the other side of one restored bridge. And the way to restore it is right there in the link below. Now let me speak to what the alarm is really protecting, because you deserve to know what is at stake, not to frighten you, but to help you see why love would interrupt centuries of silence for this. What the widening threatens is not just your comfort. It is your calling. It is the specific thing you were placed here to be and to do, the contribution only you can make, the person only you can become. That is what drifts out of reach as the gap widens, and that is what the alarm was sounded to save. Because here is the truth about a calling. It does not shout. It is carried in the visionary half of you, the quiet half. And as the widening pushes that half further away, the calling gets quieter, not because it died, but because the distance muffles it. Many people, by the time they are old, cannot hear it at all anymore, and they mistake that silence for never having had one. They did have one. It simply drifted beyond hearing while they were busy managing the days. Heaven sounded this alarm, so that would not be your story, so that you would catch the drift at the threshold, close it, and live near enough to your calling to actually answer it. And let me tell you who this is for, so you know whether it is describing your life. It is for the one who feels the distance from who they were meant to be, and cannot close it, no matter how they try. It is for the one who functions well and grieves quietly, competent at a life that is not quite the one they were made for. It is for the one who suspects their calling is slipping away and is terrified it is already too late. If that is you, then this alarm is yours, and so is the tool that answers it. And the companion pieces that come with it are shaped for the ordinary hours. So the nearness you find in those 8 minutes holds when the demands of the day try to pull the halves apart again. That nearness, chosen one, is what has been drifting away from you, and it does not have to drift one day longer. The alarm woke you at the threshold precisely so you could turn the drift around while turning it around is still swift. Tonight, you are not too late. You are exactly on time, woken on purpose, handed both the warning and the way to answer it in the same breath. And the same tool that reverses the widening is the thing that brings your calling back within reach. And I want to answer the fear that is probably still sitting underneath all of this, the quietest one. Some part of you is afraid that even if you close the gap, you will find that your calling was never anything special, that you will do the work and reclaim the nearness and discover there was nothing worth reclaiming. Hear this clearly. Heaven does not sound a red alert over an empty life. It does not break centuries of silence for a calling that does not matter. The very fact that this alarm exists, aimed at you, is proof that what drifted out of reach was significant enough to be worth waking you for. You are not being called back to nothing. You are being called back to the exact thing you were most afraid you had imagined. Now, whether or not you ever step through that door tonight, I refuse to let you leave without the thing you actually came for. So let me say the whole truth of this evening in the plainest words I have. The alarm was never doom, it was love, waking you at the exact moment a gap inside you widened to the point of threatening your calling, so you could close it while closing it is still possible. You are not too late. You are not being punished. You are being rescued, in time, on purpose. The distance you have felt from who you were meant to be is real, but it is not final, because a drift can always be reversed, while the two halves still remember each other. And yours still do. And do not miss what tonight itself has shown you. Of everything that could have reached you, an alarm did, at the exact threshold, in the narrow window when reversing the drift is still swift. That is not chance. You were flagged, deliberately, and this was sent to reach you before the window closed. The very fact that these words are waking you instead of frightening you into paralysis is the sign that some part of you has already begun to turn back toward wholeness. You were led here so the alert would not arrive too late. It did not. Hold that, because the drift is going to test it. In a day, in a week, the widening will resume its slow pull, and the fog will try to creep back, and a voice will whisper that the distance is just how life is, that you imagined the whole thing. When it does, remember what you now know. That whisper is not the voice of God, and it is not the truth about your calling. It is the drift, still doing what drift does. You do not have to obey it, and you do not have to believe it. You only have to remember that behind the fog, fully alive, the person you were made to be is still there, still reachable, still waiting for the gap to close. And I want to honor the managing part of you before we close, because it is not your enemy. That half of you that took over as the visionary half receded, that kept the daily machinery running through all the hard years. It did not cause the widening out of malice. It filled the gap the only way it knew how, by working harder, by managing more, by keeping you functional when wholeness felt out of reach. It has carried you faithfully, so we do not resent it. We thank it, and we let it know that it can finally stop straining to be the whole of you, because the other half is coming home, and the two of you were always meant to carry the calling together. And notice something, chosen one. If even now, just from words, some part of you has already felt the fog thin, already felt a little nearer to yourself than you did an hour ago, then you have proof in your own body that the drift can reverse. That small nearness is the smallest possible taste of the gap fully closed. So if you typed the words, "I hear it" earlier, feel what you were really doing. You were answering the alarm. You were telling heaven the message landed in time. And if you have not yet, it is not too late, because answering is not a single act, it is a direction you turn. Turn toward it now. Send one honest signal that you heard the alert and you are moving, and let the one who sounded it know that centuries of silence broke over your life for a reason, and the reason will not be wasted. And picture, just for a moment, what your life looks like a season from now, with the gap closed and the drift reversed. Picture waking up near to yourself again, the fog gone, the calling that felt like a distant memory, now clear enough to act on. Picture the grief of the missed life, replaced by the strange joy of a life still available. Picture living from wholeness instead of straining toward it. The two halves of you moving as one, the person you were made to be no longer across a canyon, but right here, in your own skin. That is not a fantasy, chosen one. That is what a life looks like when an alarm is answered in time. And the whole distance between you and that life is the width of one closing gap. And so, before this message ends, I am going to do what I promised at the very start. I am going to speak something over your life, and I want you to receive it not as words on a screen, but as a signal sent straight to the part of you that the alarm was sounded for. So let everything go still for a moment. Let your shoulders drop away from your ears. Let the breath you have been holding all day finally leave you, slow and complete. There is nothing to fear here. There is only a gap to close. Let us begin with gratitude, quietly. without straining to feel it. Thank you for sounding the alarm before it was too late. Thank you for refusing to let me sleep through my own moment. Thank you for loving my calling enough to break centuries of silence over my life. We do not have to manufacture this. We only have to notice, softly, that the warning was mercy all along. And now, chosen one, we release. Picture the widening as a distance you have carried in your chest, and let it begin to close. Release the fear that you are too late. Release the grief of the life you thought you missed. Release the belief that the distance is just how life goes. Release the drift from the power it has held over you for years. Release the fog that muffled your calling. Release the exhaustion of straining across a gap from one side. Release it all, and let the two halves of you turn toward each other, and let the distance close, and let your calling come near again. And from that stillness, hear who you actually are, and say it with me now. Not as a shout, but as a homecoming. I am not too late. I did not miss it. The person I was made to be is still here, and still mine. I am whole when the two halves of me move as one, and they are coming home. I hear the alarm, and I am answering it. I am chosen, and my calling is back within reach. Let that declaration settle all the way down, past the thinking mind, into the place where the widening began, and let the gap close. If everything in you wants to make this real, and refuses to let the drift resume, the door is waiting in the description, and pinned in the comments below, and the same full guarantee carries it when you arrive. So you step through risking nothing but the distance you were already grieving. Whatever you decide it as the one who answered the alarm in time. The alert reached you, chosen one, and it was not too late. Take a breath. The gap is closing. Your calling is near. You were woken for this, and it is sealed. It is done.